Welcome into this week's episode of Your Drone Questions Answered, brought by Drone Launch Academy. I'm your host, Chris Belove. Today's question is this, kind of a really fascinating topic to me. How are sub 250-gram drones, think DJI Minis, how are they used? How can they be used? How are they being used to empower the next generation of spatial AI? So to help me tackle this really fascinating topic, I'm excited to welcome Alec Wilson from Spexi. Alec, thanks so much for joining the show today. Would you please tell our listeners a little bit about your personal background and Spexi, what you guys are doing there?
So I'm the chief operating officer here at Spexi Geospatial Inc. We build software applications that interface with drones, specifically very small drones like the micro drone category, in order to image vast areas of the urban land interface, specifically in cities, but also in the periphery of cities and in different places where you might want high resolution imagery to help tackle different kind of problems like emergency response and preparedness. And then of course, like this really exciting use case like spatial AI. So my background is I'm a commercial helicopter pilot. I flew roughly 2000 hours here in Canada, doing wildfire fighting, flying geologists around, supporting crews and forestry, you name it. I did it. Also did lots of low-level aerial survey. And that's how I got into the drone space. I realized that drones were coming onto our job sites more and more, and trying to figure out how I could get involved. And I was really interested in them. And I ended up being involved in starting one of Canada's largest drone training companies, not too dissimilar to what you guys are doing. And that really gave me a good insight into how this whole space works and how regulations affect drone operations and how you can actually get things done safely and legally with drones in the current visual line of sight and soon to be hopefully usable beyond visual line of sight regulations. And that led me to Spexi. And so in about 2020, I met the CEO of Spexi, Bill, who was in the early stages of building the software platform to help automate drones using standardized software to try to cover larger areas. And we had a few different ideas of how best to take the software. When I came on board with him, we really decided to go after this much larger scale vision of trying to cover vast amount of cities using drones, specifically sub 250-gram drones, while fully standardizing the imagery inputs so that it's super simple for pilots to use. The flight plans are already set up for them in our hexagon system, and it produces ultra high resolution data at around 1 inch ground sample distance, or roughly 2.8 centimeters. That is the same everywhere. So it's a fully standardized imagery layer of Earth using off-the-shelf drones. This has never existed before. And so customers can come in and actually utilize this data, not too differently than how they would consume satellite imagery through APIs, and be able to actually fuel their applications with imagery that they can rely on, whether it be in LA, whether it be in Austin, Texas, Vancouver, maybe London, England, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. We can start to use this hexagon standardized system to actually cover the Earth with drone imagery in a way that's usable to customers. And it's a really important part of it. So we're on this mission and it's really exciting time for us.
Well, that's awesome. I think the first question that many might have, and we named this episode accordingly, focusing on that lightweight drone, that micro drone, that sub 250-gram drone, like a DJI Mini. Let our folks know why go so small in the urban
Yeah,
environment?
it's a great question. And I mean, it comes from us being Canadian. One of the few advantages we have over Americans in business is sometimes we have a different perspective on businesses even from a regulatory perspective. And this is one of those cases. So when the new modern drone regulations came out in Western countries, roughly in 2019, in Canada, they were called CARS Part 9 regulations. And in the United States, obviously Part 107. In Canada, we had a bit of a different thing than you guys did. What we did is we based our regulatory system on risk or weight of the drone, not intent, like what Part 107 did if you're flying commercially or recreationally. And so what this meant is that drones that weighed less than 250 grams actually had much less operating restriction on them than drones that weighed over 250 grams. At the time in 2019, there was no capable 250-gram drone. It didn't exist. DJI had not produced the Mini yet. And it was frankly unfathomable that there would be a weight class, under 250 that would be useful from a flying perspective, a range perspective, a C2 perspective, an imagery perspective. But sure enough, in 2020, DJI came out with the Mini and we were all shocked, right? It was like, oh my God, like crazy that they could engineer that. Like what a feat of engineering to get a flyable, usable drone under 250 grams. And so in Canada, we were able to use these drones without having licenses. Now, of course, we encourage everyone on our network, regardless of the country you're in, to have a license, even if it's the lowest license, because it's better for everybody in the network and the airspace and the ground users. But still in Canada, the sub 250-gram drone enables you to fly almost anywhere. You don't have to interact with the airspace system if you don't want to, and you don't need a license if you don't want to have one. And fly legally, commercially, go do what essentially whatever you want to do as long as you're being safe and responsible. So this gave us a special insight into the capability of these sub 250s because people were using them for so many different kinds of applications due to the operating freedom that you got up in Canada. And our customers were also doing this, that were using our software products. They're saying, look, we're flying these minis. Everyone on our team has one because most people don't really want to get a license and they're not really doing a lot of complicated flying, but they can legally fly these minis and we're happy to have them do that. Can you guys automate these things for us? At the time, there was no SDK from DJI and we were pushing them for it. And sure enough, it came out in the Mini 2 not soon after they released the Mini 2. And we were one of the first companies to build a mapping application for the minis using their SDK. And it was challenging because you actually have to use what's called virtual stick. So you have to simulate the movements of the actual controller in the drone's brain versus just uploading waypoints to it. So you're actually flying it with software physically, which is a lot harder to do than the waypoint stuff. So it was a bit of an engineering challenge. But what we realized is that sub 250s are incredibly capable. They have great C2. They handle wind way better than you'd think when mapping. And when mapping on automated flight plans, they actually produce great data. It's really, really good data for the size of the drone. And the operating benefits that you get, especially when flying in urban areas, because people can't really hear them. They can't really see them because they're so small. Most people think they're kind of cute. They're just this little cute drone. You can actually go operate in areas where perhaps before you would face some resistance from folks around saying, hey, why are you flying that drone here or whatever, right? And so we quickly realized that keeping the drone as small as possible in order to capture large amounts of area, especially in urban settings, was a really important part of the successful outcome. And so we decided to go all in, and on our network now, which is called the Layer Drone Network and the Spexi platform, it only accepts 250s. So DJI Mini 2, Mini 3, Mini 4, Mini 3 Pro and Mini 4 Pro. And I think Americans in particular are kind of surprised because they're not used for commercial purposes nearly as much in the United States. But as soon as they start doing it, they're like, oh my gosh, what a fun experience to fly with this thing. Like, it's so great and you can earn doing it. And so it's kind of the nutshell of the sub 250, but we're hell bent on the sub 250. We think that it's the future of urban drone flying.
Yeah. And I guess let's talk about scale maybe. Obviously, Canadian company, I think you mentioned offline as well, Alec, that this is going, and you referenced like Rio and London. Like, how far, if you got stats or however you want to tell the story, has the Spexi network gone as far as capturing major, or maybe not major, but any kind of city, I guess, around the world? What's the reach as it sits today? And we'll call it summer 2025.
Yeah, I mean, to date, and to my knowledge, we're the largest fully standardized drone imaging network on Earth. We've flown over 3.5 million acres in Canada and the United States, covering most major cities and lots of smaller cities with ultra high resolution drone imagery, roughly at 2.8 centimeter GSD, or roughly 1 inch ground sample distance resolution. This is all done in a fully standardized autonomous way using our mobile application that pilots download and use their off-the-shelf minis to contribute data in a completely standardized way using our hexagon system. We've flown over 115,000 of these 25-acre hexagons, which take roughly 7 minutes to fly. So it computes to like, I don't know, a couple flight years of drones in the air constantly if you were to like map it all out. Contributed by hundreds and hundreds of pilots. There's almost 10,000 pilots now in our community on Discord. It's just scaling like crazy. I think pilots are understanding that this is a new way, a new standard that they can use to contribute imagery to something that's much bigger than their individual mini. Customers are able to access this imagery and use it for wildfire preparedness and wildfire response and flood preparedness and response. And we did some tornado stuff in St. Louis just recently, I think, in the United States. And our pilots were on the Palisades fire capturing imagery for people that had been evacuated, and lots of that in Canada as well. We're seeing development companies come on to be able to make better decisions about how best to invest their capital to grow their resources. We're seeing insurance companies use this data to not have to go out into the field after a category 1 or a CAT event where it's a catastrophic event and they need better information about their insured assets. And I think most excitingly, we're seeing this next generation of spatial AI models and applications and games, and huge amounts of capital being invested into street smart AI that can actually understand the physical world instead of just semantics like the LLM. And I don't say just lightly. I mean, AI is obviously very advanced, but when you contribute to this network, you're part of all of those really exciting use cases, which I think is a really exciting thing for a lot of drone pilots. I think a lot of pilots love to fly their drones, and they're looking for more and more ways to do that, and not just to go fly and make an Instagram video on the weekend, but to actually contribute to something that's making a difference in the world. And that's what, we've been able to culture here. So it's definitely a new take on how drone imagery networks are built. I think we're the first to fully standardize the imagery layer and the inputs and make only specific models enabled to contribute, and fully standardize their flight plans so that you just have to show up and hit fly on your mobile app and not have to worry about adjusting your flight plan and making sure it's all correct, and talking to the customer and making sure that you've got the right sensor and all that stuff. It's just fully taken care of for you. All you have to do is download our mobile application, do some onboarding steps. In the United States, you have to submit your Part 107 license to the application. And then you simply just get close to these hexagons in your city and start capturing them. And then you go hex to hex to hex. And, we have pilots earning $300, $400, $500, $600 a day doing this. And they also get to meet a bunch of other fellow pilots doing it in their city. They can all chat on our Discord and our app, and they can meet up and go for coffee and talk about the Spexicons they flew that day. And we've seen that all across Canada and the United States. So we're really building this exciting, innovative community of drone pilots that I think are looking for more realistic ways to use their drones than some of these older two-sided marketplaces like Dronebase, where you would sign up, you might get one mission and then you wait 3 months and you get another call and maybe you get another mission. But like in this network, you can fly almost as much as you want.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. For my kind of geospatial background, like Mapillary, if you're familiar with them, and they're more like a street view type service. And I feel like the really interesting distinction, what you just said in that, Alec, is that that's also crowdsourced. I mean, there's stuff there where it's like someone's like dash camera, or I've personally contributed to that on like multi 6-figure systems I used to sell, which is like way different than obviously a little dash cam. But so the cool part is you get that coverage of wherever people have been and want to upload. But the downside totally is there's no standardization, right? So you have some really awesome 360 cameras of downtown X, Y, or Z. And then the next year, you're like, oh, well, it's just a cell phone. So it's not standardized, still powerful. I like what you guys are doing. It's pretty neat that it is, in fact, standardized. And I guess your clients who are using this, they don't have to say, well, dang it, we had this really awesome imagery in Rio, but now what we got in London is like crisper or way coarser or whatever, because it's all over the place. Y'all have eliminated that problem, it sounds like.
I mean, yeah. And like before this, we didn't the jury was out if you could do it, right? Like we didn't know operationally at this scale. Like it's just, when you think about the amount of area that's been flown, 3.5 million acres. I'm standing in the Spexi offices in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada right now. And I've got this great view at the top of this tower. I'm looking out across all the, the lower mainland, and I'm, as far as the eye can see, it's been imaged on this network, and way, way more than that. And it's just like the scale is crazy. And it's because we've made it so simple for pilots to contribute using the system and using software that it just, they can move really quickly. And I think for us, that's one of the big things that we've been building for, is trying to build a reactive on-demand system that can build a base layer, but that can also respond very, very quickly to the needs of customers. Just like when you task a satellite, right? You can go in and task a satellite and it will do it because it's a robot and it's going to do what its master tells you to do. But obviously when you're using human pilots, you have to get them on side. And one way to do that is incentivizing them with reward, whether it be cash or other. So it turns into this very powerful imaging system that, we've had customers come in and say, hey guys, we see that you've mapped these areas 3 weeks ago. We actually need imagery from yesterday. How quickly can you get us data? And we would go onto the network, light up those hexes within the area. The pilots get notified that there's new hexes up in their area to fly. And within hours, those pilots are capturing that imagery and uploading it to the network, which is made available in the customer's portal within 15 minutes of upload. And so it's just this like very sleek data pipeline that enables unprecedented speed of drone quality imagery into customers' hands. And so certainly I think a big part of the potential here is the scale, because the other thing is we use off-the-shelf drones that are mostly available everywhere in the world, right? DJI has done an incredible job of getting its technology out to vast majority of the population that's interested in it. And so all we need to do, if we want to open up Rio de Janeiro, if we want to open up London, which we've done flights in London and other parts of the world already, we just need to make sure that the hexagons that are being overlaid on the city are in the right places and not in restricted airspace or too close to airports. And then we just do a little bit of marketing into that area saying, hey, here's a new way to earn with your drone. It's really simple. Here's the process. Here's all the other pilots that have done it and have found success. Why don't you try it out? We do online, Facebook, Google marketing, get people onboarding. And then it just kind of snowballs from there. And all of a sudden you have sensors, you have nodes of operation, sensors of of data from the drone pilots imaging in whatever country, you know, that we decide to move into. And you can do that within weeks even or months. So it's a very scalable system. We've made very direct choices though to try to scale it first in North America because we believe that if we can build it here and scale it here, we can probably scale it anywhere in the world.
Could you maybe first touch on, if I can say the word metaverse, if that's even the right term in this discussion, but gaming, however you want to talk about that would be really fun. How are these, if large geospatial models is the right term for that, how are these being fed from the data like that y'all's pilots are capturing, or maybe other data? How is that being used? Why do the gaming companies care about that kind of data?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, gaming's a huge business. There's a ton of capital, flowing in and out of it at any given time. And I think there's a really big draw towards games that are built on real world data. Some developers are trying to implant games into the physical world to generate experiences that people can interact with while actually being outside in our own planet instead of sitting in your basement and just, going. And so I think one of the most famous ones is Pokemon Go, right? Almost everyone knows Pokemon Go, and you're actually out in the physical world trying to catch Pokemons, and they're superimposed on your phone. And obviously they're not in the real world, but they look like it on your phone. And the developers of that game, Niantic, have been, I think, obsessed with figuring out how to do this better and get people outside more. And they've made some really exciting recent announcements about the next generation of spatial AI and being able to have AI be street smart instead of book smart like it is now, have both of those things interact. So robots that will be walking around our streets or driving around our streets or flying around our cities will be able to think spatially and actually have a cortex that's meant for navigation and understanding of the physical world instead of the semantic internet or the books that it's trained on in the LLM world. And so I think Pokemon Go is a really interesting example of how this real world experience translates into this large geospatial context. And I think most people don't realize, but when you're playing Pokemon Go, you're also like scanning the world, right? Like you've got your camera out and they're taking that aggregated data and making models using this geospatial phone data. Snapchat's another really good example, right? They can overlay things in real time on their phone filters, and they've invested billions into the AR, XR glasses that enable you to interact with the physical world while having fun and communicating and connecting with friends. And there's a lot of really big companies that are investing billions into what they think will be this next version of places for the internet to be and interact. And geospatial data has never been more relevant in that sense because they all want more and more detailed, more and more accurate data sets to be able to build on top of that truly represent the physical world and exactly how it is now and tomorrow and the next day, and not just, satellite imagery that's maybe 30 centimeters per pixel at best, or fixed wing imagery that's maybe 10 centimeters per pixel at best. It's just not detailed enough. And so drones provide this ultra high resolution layer that these games, it's detailed enough and it's from the air. So it's covering this perspective that they can actually build this into their applications. And it's one of our most exciting go-to-market strategies for the network, is working with some of these really innovative and impressive geospatial companies to integrate drone-based data into these products. And, we've made some good headway, and there's some really exciting things that hopefully be coming soon that we can announce, but there's a lot of energy, a lot of excitement around the metaverse, the omniverse. NVIDIA is building into it. They've got some incredible new things that they're announcing. I mean, Tesla's been sort of building it with their cars for a long time, but kind of more specific to that use case. And I think some of these other companies are really thinking about a more general model that would interact with autonomous robots, with humanoid robots, even with robotaxis and drones, right? Like they could all use these geospatial models to help them understand how to navigate and interact with urban areas. And so it's just been such a fascinating space to be in the last 6 and 12 months. Even there's been so many cool things coming out with AI backing it. And we feel really fortunate to be able to contribute in some way.
Absolutely. So just other non-gaming related use cases, if there's any that pop to the top of your mind that you'd like to highlight as well. Where else do you see this going? Where else is it going for your customers, users of the imagery?
It's almost challenging because there's so many use cases for this kind of data. Like, whether you're a city planner and you work at the city of Chicago and you need to better understand how vegetation is encroaching on new permits that are being generated, instead of having to send someone out to go look at that lot and see where the vegetation is and physically mark down, okay, it's good, or no, it needs to be trimmed. You can use our data because it's so high resolution to understand that and not have to go out of the office. whether it's a construction manager that wants to get a quick snapshot of updates on their sites instead of having to go send their own drone pilots out, or what have your drive around, they can use this imagery and task it. Whether it's planners and responders to emergencies, like I kind of said earlier, which is a big use case for us. And I think it's not an exciting use case. It's like, obviously emergencies we don't love to see them, but they are a reality. And to give first responders better tools to more effectively respond or prepare for emergencies. Like, one example is in Canada, companies in the government have used our imagery to basically help communities better plan their vegetation clearing, so that like the imagery you can use computer vision to quickly show you, okay, these trees should get trimmed. These are fine. These ones are really dry. You should get those out, right? So that they can, should a fire, God forbid, ever come through their town, they're much more prepared by the natural clearing of vegetation versus, not doing that and having everything go up. And then once, if a fire does come through, the before and after data is incredibly valuable to planners and residents and all of that. It's kind of endless, really, like autonomous cars. We've talked to the guys at Uber. We've talked to like last mile delivery companies. They all want more accurate views of where to deliver things so they can save time and, like the last quarter mile of deliveries of the last mile. And it's really exciting. I think when you contribute to this network as a drone pilot, what you know is that you're contributing to something that's much bigger than just your one drone flight. It's a totally living data set of Earth that is going to make people more efficient, make industries better, hopefully make the world a better place.
Absolutely. Perfect way to wrap it up there, Alec. Yeah, again, really fascinating conversation. Thank you for coming on and sharing all this, what you guys are doing. Alec, I thank you. For our listeners, as always, if you have a question let's tackle on this show, please drop me a line at chris@dronechatting.com, submit it at ydqa.io, or if you're in the drone launch community, submit your questions there. Until next time, have a great week.